Hello and welcome to The Nation with me, Melissa Ong. On October 1st, Israeli ground forces entered southern Lebanon, escalating their offensive against Hezbollah. This follows weeks of intense Israeli attacks, including an airstrike that killed Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. By September 30th, Lebanon's health ministry reported over 1,000 deaths and 6,000 injuries in the past 2 weeks. Now, in this edition of The Nation, we explore Lebanon's state of turmoil with Dr. Olsi, Assistant Professor at the International Islamic University, Malaysia, as he walks us through this context of this conflict. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Olsi. Thank you for taking your time for this show. Let's start off with this. Could you provide an overview of Hezbollah and its significance in the region?
Well, Hezbollah is one of the resistant groups which fights for the liberation of Lebanon and Palestine from Israeli invasion. Established by Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, in 1982, Hezbollah has proven to be one of the most effective non-state actors in facing Israeli colonization in the Middle East. Hezbollah grew in its fame in 2006, when for the first time since the creation of Israel in 1948, an Arab and Muslim power forced Israel to retreat. This was during the Second Lebanon War of 2006, when Israel was doing what it is trying to do right now. It entered into Lebanon in order to dismantle Hezbollah, but Israel got beaten very bad. Hezbollah has one of the most advanced weapons among the Arab states nowadays. It runs like a guerrilla organization, but thanks to the terrain of Lebanon, has proven very effective on defeating and threatening the Israeli state.
So what are the reasons behind Israel's current military action against Hezbollah, and what factors contribute to the United States' support for Israel in the conflict?
Well, the Israeli project started during World War I. It was the British who defeated the Ottomans. I come from Albania. We were part of the Ottoman Empire. And it was the Ottoman defeat in 1917-18, when the British, they decided to establish a Jewish state. But since 1918 and 17, with the Balfour Declaration, Israel has not been able to establish its superiority over the Arabs and Muslims. Now, there have been 4 major Arab-Israeli wars, but these Arab-Israeli wars ended in 1973, and they were finalized with the Oslo Accords, where Israel thought that is over, and Israel believed that it defeated the Arabs and the Muslims, and it thought that it can now ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. But what has happened is that, especially since the Second Iraq War in 2003, when the Americans went and invaded Iraq and they toppled Saddam Hussein, Hezbollah and Iran as well, they used the chaos to build what is called the Axis of Resistance. This Axis of Resistance are a group of Islamic militias based in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, in Palestine, where we have Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. And the most powerful of all these militias is Hezbollah. The existence of Hezbollah doesn't allow the extremist government of Israel to achieve its dream of ethnically cleansing Palestine from Palestinians and destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Because the desire of extremist Zionists who today rule Israel is to destroy the Aqsa Mosque, which is the 3rd holiest mosque of Islam, and in its place to build the Temple of Solomon. Jewish extremists, they believe that by destroying Aqsa Mosque, God is going to forgive them and he will bring the Messiah. Because in Jewish theology, they don't believe in Jesus. They think that Jesus Christ was not the Messiah, but he was an impostor. And because in their holy scriptures, they have been promised by God that he will send to them the Messiah, they think that the Messiah will come once they defeat Islam. And Hezbollah being there is a major headache for Israel, which wants to achieve its messianic vision of cleaning Palestine from Muslims.
Now help us understand why is Hezbollah supporting Gaza?
Hezbollah is supporting Gaza because this is a joint war of Arabs and Muslims. I mean, the members of Hezbollah, even though they belong to the Shia sect of Islam, they share a common struggle with Gaza and Palestinians. Since last October, when Israel started its genocide against the Muslim population of Gaza and West Bank, Hezbollah felt its Islamic duty to come to support the Palestinians in their fight for survival. On the other hand, being a Shia organization, Hezbollah, they are also messianic like the Zionists. They believe that this is the end of the time, and they believe that by fighting against Israeli colonization and apartheid, God is going to bring Imam Mahdi to the Muslims, who is going to lead a struggle for liberation of Palestine. On the other hand, the American government, which is run and influenced by the Zionist lobby and extremist evangelical Christians, they do believe that they have to support Israel because according to evangelical and Zionist theology, they believe that God will bring redemption to the Jews and will bring Jesus back to earth only when they defeat Muslims and they establish the so-called Eretz Israel. And this biblical Israel, which the Zionists want to establish, should extend from Iraq to Egypt, from River Nile to River Tigris.
And help us understand what drives Israel's current military actions against Hezbollah, and why does the U.S. support Israel in this conflict, Doctor?
So Israel feels threatened about its mega Zionist project. In 1979, the Americans, they, in a way, brought the Palestinians and Israelis to a peace, and this came during the Oslo Accords, after the Camp David Accords, where the Americans, they wanted to establish two states in what we know as historical Palestine. One state was supposed to be Israel, and the other state was supposed to be Palestine. But what happened is that Jewish extremist groups, they killed the then Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, and from that time, Israeli state has been taken hostage by extremist Jews. Now, these extremist Jews, while after the fall of the Soviet Union and America's war against Sunni Islam, since 1991, the Americans have waged wars against 6 Sunni Muslim states in the Middle East, and they destroyed them, against Iraq, and they removed Saddam Hussein, Libya with Gaddafi, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. So, I mean, Israel and the Americans, with the destruction of these 6 countries, they thought that they finally defeated the Arab and the Muslim world, and they thought that now we can do anything we want with the Muslims. During the era of the Trump administration, in 2020, Trump forced a number of Arab countries, like United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, to sign the so-called the Abrahamic Accord. The Abrahamic Accord, which the Trump and the Zionist administration of Israel wanted to do, was the building of a Sunni alliance in the Middle East against Palestinians against Iran and those revolutionary groups which want to liberate Palestine. But what happened is that the project of the Abrahamic Accord failed, and Iran, by using the chaos which was created in the Middle East, created a new alliance, which is called the Axis of Resistance. This Axis of Resistance wants to force Israel to become a democracy. By becoming a democracy, it means that Israel have to treat Palestinians as citizens of Israel, and they should be given the right to stay in their country, to vote, and to choose a joint government with Israeli Jews. But Israeli extremists, they don't want this. They have established instead an apartheid state where the Palestinians, even though they are in their native historical lands, they are treated as slaves. And the existence of Hezbollah and the Axis of Resistance threatens this fascist project of Israeli state.
Well, so much to discuss about, a lot of history right there. But we'll be right back after this short commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back with me and Dr. Olsi as we talk about Lebanon's turmoil. Dr. Olsi, how will the Israel Defense Forces IDF incursion into Lebanon complicate efforts to resolve the Gaza issue, especially with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu potentially taking bolder actions?
Well, the Israeli intervention in Lebanon is going to open a new bloody chapter for the people of the Middle East. We have to remind our viewers that last night was a historical night because last night Iran bombed Israel.
Yep.
It was a massive bombing where Iran was revenging the killing of the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed in Tehran in April of this year, and the assassination of the Secretary General of Hezbollah a few days ago, Hassan Nasrallah. So, last night it was a very historical night for the history of Israel, because since its creation or establishment in 1917 and its creation of a state in 1948, Israel has always been armed to the teeth by the British and the Americans. And historically, Israel had military superiority over its Muslim nations. And what happened last night, it is that for the first time in the history of Israel, Israel was massively bombed by Iranian missiles, and the Israeli state was simply unable to defend itself. Now, the Israeli intervention in Lebanon, we are not sure if it is going to happen or not. Israeli war machine and media, they are proclaiming that they are entering in Lebanon, but for people like me, whose job is to follow the news and to teach to my students, is that until now, Israel has not militarily entered in Lebanon. They are bombing Lebanon from the sky because they want to assassinate all the leaders of the resistance. We're having border skirmishes, but we have to see if Israel will dare to militarily invade Lebanon. The experience of Israel with the invasion of Lebanon in 1982 and 2006 was very bad. We had hundreds and probably thousands of Israeli soldiers who were killed. And even today in morning, Hezbollah managed to kill a number of Israeli soldiers in the borders of Lebanon and Israel. So we have to see what's going to happen. But the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, he's desperate because, look, Israel doesn't have a strategic depth. It is a very tiny country. It's a country probably the size of Selangor. And when you have such a small country, which runs on foreign money and weapons, we have the image of Israel being such a powerful country, but it is not. It is powerful because United States, Germany and Britain furnish it with money and weapons. But Israel is very desperate because while the Jewish state is there since 76 years, it has not been able to establish peace with its Arab neighbors. After the Oslo Accords, the Palestinians, with President Yasser Arafat, they offered an olive branch to Israel and told to Israelis, look, let us coexist, let us live in peace. But the present administration, which is an extremist administration, they don't want any Arab and Muslim to live in the so-called Israel, because they want to create a purely clean religious and ethnic Jewish state. And because they're doing this, and because they're killing Palestinians, and because they're bombing all their neighbors, there is not a single neighbor that loves Israel. So the philosophy of the present Israeli government is that we have to defeat the Arabs and to defeat them into submission. But what is happening with Hezbollah and other Islamic militias is that Israel is failing. Israelis cannot sleep at night. If someone like me, who have visited Israel and goes to Israel, you will see that this is not a normal state. It is a military garrison. You go in Israel, like if you go here to Malaysia in KLCC, you'll see people with guns in their hands. They're afraid from their neighbors. So this is not a normal state. And for this reason, they suffer from their paranoia against their Arab and Muslim nations. And they think that the only way how we can exist in the Middle East is by blackmailing with a gun all our neighbors.
Now, Dr. Olsi, despite global calls for a ceasefire in Lebanon, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has, of course, rejected them, as we can see all over the news, and his support among Israeli has actually grown. Are there any signs of a potential diplomatic solution, or are we mostly hearing rhetoric from the international community?
Well, when we talk about international community, we have to be very careful because we have two kinds of international communities. One is the one that Americans use, where we mean the NATO countries, the West, who are commanded by the Americans. But if we talk about the majority of the international community, which is Malaysia, Turkey, Russia, Iran, China, they're against Israel. So they're demanding at the United Nations for Israel to stop its aggression. And we have to mind here, we have even Western institutions like the International Court of Justice, which is indicting Israeli rulers for genocide. But what happens is that we have a major problem when we deal with Israel, and that is the United States. And because the Jewish lobby controls elections, they have corrupted democracy in America. There is no American president or administration who will dare to tell to Israelis, stop the crimes that you are doing. And history have shown to us that Israel learns only by force. In 2006, Israel wanted to invade Lebanon, but because they were defeated, they were forced to sign a peace, or how can I put it? They were forced to retreat themselves from Lebanon. Even today, in this very moment, while the Americans are standing behind Israel, the only way how Israelis will be forced to retreat and to stop their bombings, their wars. I mean, in this very moment, Israel is fighting against 5 countries. And the only way how the Americans will be, in a way, will surrender themselves to the international community and they will tell to Israelis, sorry, we cannot help you anymore, is if Israel is defeated in war. And for this reason, the axis of resistance, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, other Arab and Muslim groups, with Hezbollah as well, they're waging a war, and their war has only one objective. The war that Hezbollah launched against Israel in October 2023, it is not to remove the Jews from Israel, it is not to destroy the Jewish state, it is to stop the genocide in Gaza. But Israel doesn't want, and American administrations and their NATO vassals, by NATO vassals I mean countries like Albania, where I come from, Germany, who are under the American dictate, they cannot do anything to force Israel to stop its war. But history has shown to us that Israel learns only through a military defeat.
Now, over the past year, we can see in the Arab Muslim world, except for Iranian proxies, has offered little support to Hamas or Hezbollah beyond threats. Why are the Arab nations hesitant to provide more than humanitarian aid and rhetoric?
Well, it's complicated and simple, but to give a short answer is Muslim countries, they are afraid from the Americans.
Why is that so?
Sorry?
Why is that so?
Because let us say, let us take the example of Turkey. If Turkey wants, I mean, we have President Erdogan who is making open calls at the UN for military intervention against Israel. But if Turkey goes on its own, it means that next day Turkey will have to fight with United States of America. So, I mean, Israel is not Israel. Israel is the United States, and there is no single Muslim and Arab country who will dare to go to war against the United States. Because the United States today is the only existing superpower. We have other superpowers like Russia or China. Yeah. But neither China nor Russia are going to go to war with a nuclear country like Israel and the United States for the sake of Palestinians. Iran, which is going to war with Israel, is sacrificing itself. Iran is under total sanctions. People in Iran, they suffer massive poverty because the country is under total sanction and embargo, and they're paying a very high price. In the past, we had countries like Syria, like Jordan, like Egypt, who went to war against Israel, but they were defeated by the Americans and they were forced into submission. So it's simple. I mean, you go to war against Israel, it means you are going to war against America.
Now, how does the war in Lebanon impact the ongoing Russia-NATO conflict over Ukraine?
Well, the war in Lebanon and last night's open war between Iran and Israel is a blessing for Russia. Why? Because it is in the interest of the Russian government to open a second front against the Anglo-American Empire. The war that we have in Ukraine since February 2022 is a war between Russia and the collective West. Western governments, led by Great Britain and United States, they want to take Ukraine from Russian control, while Russia is fighting for its own sphere of influence. The present conflict in Lebanon, and I have to mind our viewers that 3 days ago, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he sent his Prime Minister Mishutin to Tehran, where in a way he gave a message of support to the Iranians to act against Israel. I mean, the situation today is like the situation during World War II, when the Russians, they were fighting in two fronts. One was the Western Front against Nazi Germany, the other one was the Asian Front against militaristic Japan. So, in this moment, for the Russians, the war and the involvement of Iran and Muslim countries in war against Israel is good, because this means we'll have more Western resources and American resources being channeled to Israel instead of being channeled to Ukraine. And the American administration of Joe Biden is very worried about it. They didn't want, they have begged Netanyahu not to start a second front in the Middle East, but Netanyahu didn't hear to them, didn't listen to them. But this is very bad for the Western alliance, because this will exhaust the Western alliance, NATO countries, because it will be more difficult for them to fight a two-front war, one against Russia, another one against Iran.
You know, Dr. Olsi, there's a lot to talk about this topic. We can go on and on and on, but thank you for enlightening us, especially in this 25 minutes. I'm sure the viewers and myself learned a lot from you today. Thank you. So indeed, it's a very sobering discussion today. Conflicts have devastating consequences no matter the outcome. The toll it takes on all sides, and especially on the innocent, is immeasurable. Stay tuned to Bernama TV as we bring you more news on the ongoing conflict in the the Middle East throughout the week. That wraps up this edition of The Nation. I'm Melissa Ong and Dr. Olsi. Thanks for watching.